call started with the CEO telling me he'd already placed an order for Compete every day. Everything started when I noticed we'd received back-to-back orders for 30 t-shirts, 30 matching t-shirts going to the same address. I made sure our team included a handwritten thank you card in them, and I just slipped a note in the email to their team letting them know, hey, if you want to talk more about this Compete Everyday mentality, I'd love to support. The CEO picked up the phone, eventually called me, and was shared a little bit of his story. He had just become CEO 3 months prior. The founder had built that company to 7 to 8 million, but they'd been stuck. This CEO was a former athlete. He had coached high school basketball in between transition season. He knows what high performance feels like, and that culture wasn't it at that time. He painted this picture for me. They had a young team where a lot of people, it was their first real job. Some people had college degrees, others didn't, but the opportunity was incredible. See, if they executed well, these people could make some serious money quickly. But that was exactly the problem. Everyone was focused on the paycheck and not the process. Someone will come in and crush it their first month, make 15K, and then they coast for 2 months because they think they've made it, because they've got money to spend. Then when they spend all that money, they start to panic and get back into the growth. The leaders were great individual performers, but most had never led anyone else before, and the inconsistency was killing that culture. This story wasn't unique. In fact, I'd heard his story before. Great people, life-changing opportunity, but no competitive culture to sustain the momentum. There were no systems in place to develop the leaders who could in turn develop others. What happened over the next 15 months wasn't magic, but it was mind-blowing. After keynoting for their team in October, I worked with them from January through March of the following year. I watched up close and personal as they scaled from that $7-8 million mark all the way up to 24 to 25 million. The team grew from 40 people to nearly 100 people. But here's what impressed me the most. This new CEO didn't try to reinvent everything. He understood his role wasn't to change the business model the founder had built. The business model worked. It was to change the culture that would allow that business model to scale. They did it by building a culture where mediocrity became impossible. The big challenge for them is that they had young talent that could make big money and had zero drive to be consistent. Here's the thing most leadership experts miss about scaling. They assume your biggest challenge is the systems or the strategy. But when you're dealing with a young, hungry team where many people are kind of in that first real job, the challenge is completely different. This team had incredible earning potential. If you hit your numbers consistently, you can make more in a year than most people with degrees can make in 2 to 3 years. That's exciting, but that also created the dangerous trap. When someone had that 15K month, they would start to check out for the next month or two, thinking they'd earned a break. I did really well. I made all this money. It's more money than I thought I had, and now I'm coasting. High performers would hit their annual goals by September and then coast through Q4. Worst of all, the team started believing that inconsistency was just the nature of sales. You have good months, you have bad months. This is just how it goes. The new CEO recognized something that the founder struggled to. You can't build a scalable business on talent alone. You actually need systems that develop consistency in your people who have never had to be consistent before. You need leadership development for people who've never had to lead before. And you need a culture that makes the process obsession more rewarding than the pay. This wasn't about changing the business model. It was about creating the cultural foundation that would allow it to scale beyond what any individual founder could manage. The first phase of this process was shifting the mindset before you change anything in the method. The first thing that we tackled and talked through wasn't their sales process, it wasn't their comp plan, it was the environment. Your physical environment either reinforces excellence or enables mediocrity. Most offices accidentally communicate that good enough is actually good enough. What we changed is how we reinforce the right messages. Those Compete Everyday shirts he had already ordered became the perfect starting. Instead of just handing them out as a nice gesture, he made them part of the daily culture. People weren't just wearing company swag, they were wearing a daily reminder of the mindset that they were committed to live. We changed the posters on the wall from the stereotypical, you can do it, success is a mindset, to messages that reinforce the culture he was driving for. Since many of his top performers had never managed anyone before, we focused heavily on teaching them to model competitive behavior first, then recognize and reinforce it in others. When you see it, you praise it. You call it out. The CEO started every leadership meeting by asking, tell me something good. He wanted to acknowledge the things going on in other people's lives and call it out, acknowledge it, celebrate it with them. He made it a habit to then celebrate the process he saw in people with their team huddles each and every week. When someone was living out their values, when someone was competing every day, putting the focus on the inputs, he wanted to praise it publicly. He was fantastic, as you can imagine, just like a sports coach, of praising competitive behaviors in in real time. When someone stayed late to hit their call target, he would call it out the next team meeting. When someone asked for feedback on a role play or heck, a lost deal, instead of just making excuses that it was the buyer, he highlighted it as the competitor mindset in action. He looked for opportunities to reinforce the values and the culture he was building, because we had to shift people from measuring success by just their monthly income to measuring it by their daily input. The person who made $15,000 but only worked 20 days that month wasn't necessarily our success story. But the person who made $8,000 and worked every single day improving their process was, because we knew over the course of the next year, that person was sowing seeds of bigger success. Try this. Instead of just celebrating the outcome wins this week, identify one person on your team who's demonstrated process excellence and recognize them publicly. Show your team that consistency gets rewarded. It's not just the results. The first month, people may think it's cheesy. We celebrate sales, not calls. But by month 2, you'll start to see small behavioral changes. By month 3, maybe the people who can't adapt to the new standards will start to feel the pressure. They may even self-select themselves out. The key insight here is that culture change starts with environmental cues, not policy memos. The second phase of this process was to set goals that scare the hell out of everyone, and then you break them down to where they don't. 6 months in, the CEO did something that shocked his entire team. He set a vision that they were going to triple their revenue within the next 18 months. He even set bigger goals for the next 5 to 10 years. What I love about this is big goals create urgency and eliminate our comfort zone. But the secret isn't in just setting them, it's making them feel actually achievable through smaller milestones. The two-part system we use to do this effectively started first with mapping our milestone. We broke that big, massive goal down into quarterly targets, then monthly benchmarks. Suddenly, the idea of triple our revenue became increase 27% this quarter, or hit this dollar amount this month. It was stretching them without paralyzing them because of how big the goal was. Second part of this was making it personal. Here's where most companies fail. They set company goals, but then they don't connect the dots to the individual purpose. We had every person set their own goals for that month that would stretch them month over month over month. They would meet with their manager. They would talk about it. They would sign a contract committing to working on the process with, right? Everybody was committed to the company's growth, whether you were on the sales floor or whether you were on the admin side or whether you were in the closing side or whether you were in the HR. Everybody had a role that not only helped them hit their financial goals and their benchmarks, but it would connect to their personal why. In fact, everyone had a vision board on their desk of their why. It wasn't just a vision of what they were trying to achieve, but the people that mattered most. You had one guy who was a single dad saving for his daughter's college fund, and he would see his monthly goal directly funding that dream. Or perhaps you had the single woman in the admin team who was saving up to buy her very first house. Each quarterly goal would start to stretch her. And if everybody won, bonuses were paid out to everyone. The really cool part about this is we established weekly call targets for everyone else. Some weeks people had to work later because they weren't locked in during the day. They were easily distracted, but the targets gave them repeatable processes focused on the inputs they controlled and not the outcomes that they hoped. So what if you tried this? Instead of just announcing your big goal, what if you created a visual map showing monthly milestones and then help each person identify their personal why and set their own challenging targets to connect to that bigger vision? This specific CEO used the model of a fundraiser. Think about a nonprofit, right? They have those thermometer, and every time they're raising funds, they're filling the thermometer all the way up. He did the same thing month over month, quarter over quarter, year over year, so everyone could see how they were contributing to the big goal, and then at their desk, they had the connection to their why and why it mattered. Initially, you're going to feel pushback when you set a goal that stretches, but when you can help them break it down, when you can help them take ownership in the outcome and the win, you'll start to see voluntary effort you never really had to ask. The framework that made this work was our compete system, specifically the see and clarify. Everyone knew what game they were playing, everyone knew what they were up against, and everyone knew why it mattered. They saw not only their contribution to the big picture, but to their personal journey. The third phase is probably the most important, and I feel like the one people miss. It's creating a feedback system that actually develops. See, here's where most companies miss the mark. They wait for quarterly reviews to give feedback, or worse, they only speak up when someone screws up. Competitors can't improve what they can't see. The difference between good performers and great ones isn't talent. It's how quickly they can identify and fix their weak spots. And in order to do that, you need someone trusted giving you feedback. They put together a 3-layer system in this organization that was mastered. First, you had weekly one-on-ones with your manager, not status updates or administrative check-ins, real coaching conversations focused on the one thing they did well and the one thing they're going to improve that next week. Everybody left with 2 targets. Second, we had group coaching sessions. We would do training sessions every single month where not only we would help develop their mindset skills and their habits, but then they would work with one of the other managers on role play. There was no judgment. It was just practice and immediate feedback on where they can improve. And then finally, we trained the people to give and receive constructive feedback from each other. We set up team captains on the sales floor. Each department had people that were consistent at giving positive feedback. And when there needed to be a difficult conversation, the teammate could point out exactly what worked. And when someone was struggling, they could help diagnose and fix it. See, the last part of this was the peer feedback system. We developed team captains throughout the organization. We trained people on giving and receiving constructive feedback better, where we weren't taking it personally, right? When someone just absolutely crushed that difficult client conversation, people would celebrate it. They'd point out exactly what they did well. And when someone was struggling, instead of having a manager or a C-suite person step in, they had a peer who could help diagnose and fix it. Everybody was in it to help everyone else win. See, feedback went from something you dreaded to something you looked forward to because it helped you get better. People would ask for it because they realized the fastest path to improvement is through feedback. So try this. Pick one person on your team and commit to giving them specific, actionable feedback the next month. Not criticism, coaching. Hey, here's the one thing I saw you do really well. And have you considered trying this? See, when you celebrate the win directly, here's what I see you doing well, you praise them. But instead of saying, hey, here's where I see you screwed up, here's where you messed up, here's what I do differently, ask them, have you considered? It puts down the defensiveness, it opens up the opportunity that they're willing to receive, reflect, and maybe they can identify the area they need to improve themselves. Like with anything, the first few feedback conversations feel awkward. But a few weeks in, people start to behave differently. A couple of months in, you'll even notice measurable improvement in areas you're coaching other, right? This is why the E in our compete framework is elevate your environment, right? It's all about understanding you are the average of the people you spend the most time with. In fact, Dr. David McClellan from Harvard estimates that 95% of our successes and failures in life can be attributed to the people we habitually associate with, which means the people around you at work influence your wins or losses. When people on a team know they're going to get coached every single week, they show up different. The ones who want to win start seeing challenges as opportunities. They start craving feedback because at the end of the day, your high performers want to know what they do well and where they want to do better. And the people that avoid feedback eventually self-select themselves out of your system, which helps your culture in the long run. Looking back, this transformation happened because the CEO understood he wasn't just scaling a business, he was developing people who'd never been developed before. Many of his team members had never had a boss, much less had a boss who invested in their own growth. And most of their managers were just kind of struggling to manage the task, not actually coach and develop other people's performance. The breakthrough came when these 3 systems executed consistently over the 15 months following. The revenue grew, the team grew, and the culture became stronger and stronger. See, the competitive mindset, it was these 3 key pieces, right? You had the environmental reinforcement, you had the compete everyday shirts, you had the banners, you had the public praising, you had the goal architecture, right? Where we were setting big goals and then we were helping the people connect not only their investment with it, but their own personal purpose to that growth. And then you set up consistent feedback loop from the top down and horizontally. This allowed consistent performance and new leaders to learn how to be better coaches. But here's what made the biggest difference. The CEO's willingness to model the behavior while investing in the people might have been written off. But see, here's what made the difference. The CEO could have easily written people off. He could have seen their inconsistency as this is just the way it is. He could have written up the inconsistency to this is just sales, but instead he developed leaders out of people who never managed. He helped inconsistent performers change their life by achieving goals and revenue they never thought possible. And he built a culture with the mindset that would show up and compete every single day. Difference between a company that gets stuck at 9 million and the one that scales to 25 isn't a change in products or more experienced people. It's building a culture where everyone, regardless of background, regardless of experience, will learn to compete with yesterday's version of themselves. And that starts with leadership that believes in people's potential more than their past performance. Who's one person on your team whose potential might be underestimated? What would happen if you started developing that person like a coach instead of managing them just like a boss? What would the next 12 months look like for them, for your team? People around you are watching. Question is, what are you showing them is possible? Go win your day today, leader. You know I'm cheering for you.